Before my grandfather died, I convinced him to tell me a bunch of different stories about his time as an American soldier in Vietnam. Quite a few of them are paranormal / out of the ordinary, so I thought that I should share them with /x/. If you have any knowledge about the Vietnamese paranormal stuff, please share, as I have a limited understanding of the subject. Also, wartime paranormal story thread, I guess. First, a little bit of context. My grandfather, drafted, sent to Nam, infantryman, private. On top of this, my grandfather is really short, like 5 feet 4 inches short. Gets assigned as a tunnel rat. Disarm explosives and booby traps above ground. Fight through and destroy Vietcong tunnels below ground. Well, fuck, may as well shoot me right now. Another guy in his platoon, half Hispanic, is short, not as short as him, but still short. His name is Daniel, and is assigned as a tunnel rat with my grandfather. Together they go on amazing subterranean adventures. JK, some of the shit they saw was, according to my grandfather, horrifying and mind-boggling. Story number 1. Sent to clear out and destroy the tunnels. Equipped with a shitty flashlight, bayonet, some explosives, and an old revolver because the M1911 were apparently shit for clearing out tunnels. Basic mission. They've done this a couple times before by now. Tunnels are pretty small, even for a rat tunnel. Not finding any traps or Vietcong, the tunnels almost seem abandoned. Whatever, they stay on guard for booby traps or armed gooks lurking behind corners. Come to a larger section in the tunnels, they can stop crawling and go into a crouching / half-standing position. They can hear water running through the tunnel. Start to think that they either are above a river, or that the tunnel just lead into a watery cavern. Daniel shines flashlight over to the other side of the room. Sees about 4 completely massive spiders. My grandfather says that they were longer than a foot, and each had a leg span of about 0 to 5 feet. 3 of them were bunched up right next to each other. One was resting about 3 feet away from the cluster. My grandfather hates spiders. He sits there paralyzed. Both of them sit there quietly, just staring at the spiders. This goes on for about 2 minutes. Grandfather takes his eyes off the cluster, looks towards the other one resting alone. It's not there. It's not there. My grandfather looks around, and sees the spider on his left, slowly but steadily advancing towards them. He screams, fires at the thing. Doesn't even seem to slow it down. He hauls ass back up the tunnel, with Daniel following close behind him. Daniel throws a grenade into the chamber as they are climbing back up through the tunnels. Make it out, screaming and yelling about spiders. Nothing follows them out. Must have died from the grenade, or it just stopped pursuing them. My grandfather told me after the story that he is pretty sure that it wasn't even a Vietcong tunnel they climbed into, but a tunnel that the spiders themselves made. Story number 2. This one is shorter. Once again, crawling underground to destroy a Vietcong tunnel. Crouch walking through the tunnels, they find a not-so-hidden booby trap. It's one of those booby traps that would release a bunch of scorpions or snakes upon tripping it. Grandfather and Daniel stop to consider their options. Figure that they might be able to disarm the trap. How hard could it be? Pretty hard apparently. This one was very complex for some reason. Not sure how to disarm the trap without releasing poisonous death animals. They decide to just blow the fucker up. Hope that the tunnel doesn't collapse. America, PNG. Back up a good bit. Lob a grenade over in the general direction. Wait. Collateral damage. Trap is gone. Continue forward. As they get to where the former trap was, they notice another tunnel, exposed by the grenade. Out of the new tunnel comes a 5 feet long centipede, which barrels right past them and down deeper into the tunnels. Fuck _ this. JPEG. Not wanting another incident like with the spiders, they plant their charges and haul us out of the tunnel. They make it out of the tunnels, shaken, but no worse for wear. Pic related is the first thing Google gave me when I typed in Vietnam centipede.
Any run-ins with the rock apes?
This one actually doesn't involve my grandfather directly, but is about some of the stories that he heard from other guys while over there. At the beginning of the war, my grandfather was talking to a bunch of guys from a different company. They tell him about how they saw a bunch of wild apes in the jungles. Bullshit. There are no apes in Vietnam. As the war goes on, more and more guys claim to have seen these apes. Oh fuck. They called them rock apes, as they threw rocks at the soldiers they encountered. Apparently they were coated in red hair, and were normally about 5 feet tall. Grandfather still isn't convinced. Thinks that they are either making shit up, or are mistaken. A bunch of guys get really defensive. Say that they were awoken in the middle of the night by screams and hollers, while being pelted by rocks. When they went out to investigate, they were ambushed by the things. Apparently the apes were extremely strong, and managed to kill 2 different soldiers. Still managed to fend them off. Grandfather still doesn't really believe the guy, which was odd because he saw a lot of weird shit too. Grandfather says that he also heard stories about giant snakes in the jungles. Keck. Just posting a story on that. Story number 4. About halfway through the war. Orders to clear out some tunnels. Start crawling through. Start faintly hearing voices. Either gooks or running water. Keep working their way through the tunnels. Voices get louder and louder. Oh fuck. This isn't water. Realize that they are probably really close to a room full of gooks. Decide to ambush them. Then blow up the tunnels. Pull out their revolvers and rush further down into the caves. Fall into a spacious room. Large white eyes all around them. Fuck. That's a lot of gooks. Raising his flashlight, he notices they are not Vietcong. According to my grandfather, they were about 3 to 4 feet tall, lanky, white, and had big eyes and ears. They were each wearing a bunch of different clothes, some obviously from looted corpses, others were basically just wearing rags. They make a hissing sound at him and Daniel, and start running deeper into the tunnels. Grandfather and Daniel are kind of awestruck, and don't know what to do. Daniel keeps going on about Latin American folklore involving gnomes and shit. They eventually just climb out and report the tunnels as being abandoned. Pic related is apparently a Latin American gnome. Just a few weird stories left.
This one actually doesn't involve tunnels. Day off, grandfather and others resting. A few of the other soldiers go down to a nearby river to cool off. About 30 minutes later, one soldier comes back screaming about how something in the river attacked one of them. Oh shit. They grab their rifles and a first aid kit and run down to the river. 3 soldiers are on the bank of the river. One is bleeding profusely and the other 2 are administering basic first aid. Grandfather says that something tore his left leg completely off. They look in the river, which is now red from blood. They see a giant serpent/eel-like creature swimming around. Yellowish and long fins on its side. Said it looked like a massive moray eel with fins. What the fuck is this thing? They fire on it, and it darts further down the river. They get the guy back to camp, but he dies of blood loss along the way.
Story number 6.
Grandfather and Daniel about to dive into some more tunnels. About to go in, when they hear a deafening roar come from the tunnel. Says it sounded like a fucking dragon. They are all stunned. Look at a nearby officer, who just kind of shrugs and tells them to go in. Geez, thanks asshole. This tunnel is apparently worse than most. Filled with giant ants and spiders. Fucking spiders. Anyways, grandfather continues to crawl through. The roaring gets more frequent the further they crawl down. Fuck this, not going to die today. They plant the charges right there, and haul us out of the tunnel. As they are crawling back up, the tunnel starts shaking like mad. They hurry the fuck up and get back to the surface. Everything up there is shaking too. They detonate the charges, destroying most of the tunnel. Roaring and shaking proceeds to stop. I might be a little longer on the next one. It's long, and probably the weirdest and most unbelievable of the bunch.
Story number 7. Last paranormal story I have. Even I have a hard time believing this one at times. But my grandfather was almost certainly sincere when telling it. He was crying, and absolutely racked with grief. This one is also a two-parter. Near the end of the war. Once again, clearing out tunnels. No creepy crawlies thus far. Crawling through, they realize that this tunnel leads into a cave of some sort. They explore the cave for a bit. They are about to head back up, when they realize that there is a light coming from one of the passages in the cave. Not either of their lights. Oh shit. They grasp their revolvers and walk through the passage. My grandfather says that they walked into a well-lit room filled with brightly colored plant life that they couldn't recognize. The light was coming from an orb on the ceiling of the cave. Vividly colored birds flying around everywhere. What the actual fuck is this place? Him and Daniel explore a little. Among other things, he finds spiky red fruit the size of a watermelon, and a bright yellow pool of water. Grandfather says it looked like he was in a fever dream. They head towards the back of the room. Find a stone altar. Blood is stained across the stone, and there is a couple of knives and other tools lying about stone. Their curiosity turns into dread. They turn around to get the hell out of there. They stop. There are 5 reptilian-looking humanoids staring at them. Says they were about 5 feet tall, blackish green, and scaly. They all appear to be wearing robes of some sort. Without hesitating, my grandfather and Daniel fire upon the creatures. One goes down, another shrieks out in pain. The room gets extraordinarily bright, and my grandfather passes out. Grandfather wakes up, back in the main part of the cave. The passage him and Daniel went down is gone. Daniel is also lying next to him, but is barely breathing. My grandfather can only do so much for him down here, and drags Daniel out of the cave and back up through the tunnels. He gets back out, and hauls up Daniel. They grab him and send him off to get medical attention. After pulling Daniel out of the cave, grandfather remembers about what he saw in the cave. Says that his vision once again goes black, and that he can't even remember the next 2 days. According to the other guys in his platoon, my grandfather was in a state of shock. He apparently could barely speak, and stuttered a lot. Almost like he was shell-shocked or something. He was also sent to get medical attention. 2 days later, he mostly recovers. He goes back, asks the platoon about Daniel. Apparently he died shortly after being pulled out of the tunnels. Grandfather breaks down. Apparently the war was close to ending after that. He only delved into 2 more tunnels after that experience. He legitimately hated anything subterranean after that. He despised caving, insects and lizards, and even requested to be cremated so that he wouldn't be buried underground. I showed him a picture of a generic reptilian alien, pic-related, and he just about had a heart attack. He said that it just needed to be blacker, but that besides that it was pretty close. I don't have any more paranormal stories from my grandfather about the war. Feel free to share if you have your own. Well folks, I'm back with the last story for this week. If you enjoy Murray's stories, old cranky biologist who claims the black carpet ate his Roth, then you'll enjoy this one. I didn't know this until hearing this story, but Murray was a military diver during the Vietnam War, in a harbor clearing unit. They did salvage, recovery, repair, rescue, clearing minefields, etc. I don't think any description of mine could do justice to what he saw, so I'll jump straight into his story. I was young back then. Not young. I suppose I didn't feel too young, but sure was a hell of a lot younger than now. I got signed up into the Frogmen. And it was, well, I sure was thankful to not be out with the rest of them boys being shot to shit by Charlie. And well, I wasn't too afraid of it. The depths. Dark. Whatnot. We had those back then. It was the circular masks, regulators and real big clumsy tanks. And it was maybe more primitive than what we got today. But it was really, even the worst missions, it wasn't too bad. And maybe I felt some guilt about that. Because all them other boys were getting shot up by Charlie and me, my job wasn't nearly so dangerous. So that was why, I guess, when they said there was a need for a volunteer from mind you, I was in the Harbor Clearin' Unit. Harbor 1. So when they said that there was need for a volunteer from Harbor 1 for some mission on the mainland, well, I stood right up and said, yes sir, that's me. They flew me out on a Huey with a bunch of airmobile boys straight away after that. I went to grab my gear, but they said just get straight on the Huey and there'll be gear waiting at the location. There'd be gear on location is what they said. I tried to chat up the airmobile boys on the way in, sort of suss out what the situation maybe was, but they were tight-lipped. In fact, I couldn't get nothing out of no one about the mission till I was right there. Some high-ranking guy, colonel or something I reckon, was there, and he points me toward this hole in the ground. And it was one of them VC tunnels that you hear about sometimes from other GIs who were deployed out there. They'd run in their tunnel to hide, then pop out to shoot you in the back, execution like, and sometimes there'd be almost a whole city down there. They'd have dozens of tunnels and passages and rooms. There was so many of 'em that we had to have a whole group, a whole division that was called the Tunnel Rats. Them Tunnel Rats was engineers. You think that'd be a pretty sweet gig, pretty safe. But those tunnel boys, they gave 'em a knife, pistol, a flashlight, and sent 'em down into these holes to clear out any VC that would be hiding down there. And they tried gas, they tried bombs, even flooding the tunnels, but Charlie was a clever devil and he'd build a dozen different ways in and out, with some sort of water-like locks that'd keep the bomb from collapsing the whole thing or filling up with water. So eventually they would just send one boy in there with a gun to clear it, and I guess if he don't come out, then they send another one in there after him. Charlie would have all sorts of devilish traps in there, clever bastards they were. Spears through the walls, bamboo spikes, all manner of venomous creature hidden, and all of that made for a hideously dangerous job of climbing in those tunnels. So when this Colonel Major whoever says to me climb in this hole, I tell him with all due respect to go fuck himself. I'm a frogman, not a tunnel rat. You sir can go fuck yourself is what I said. He says the tunnel got the all clear from the rats already, no traps or Charlie in there, and I was a bit suspicious about that. But they brought out the guy who cleared it, and he told me that it was near as safe as a VC tunnel ever could be. Though beyond a point they'd flooded it by accident or to cover their tracks, I don't think anybody was certain on that. So that was why they had needed me for the job. Colonel Major Sarge was of the mind that if the VC flooded themselves in or out, then there'd be valuable intel or something important hidden down at the bottom of that flooded tunnel. So they handed me a pistol and a rope to drag my gear behind with on account of how narrow the tunnel was. At this point I was more than a bit uncertain about this operation, but what I figure is that if someone had to be doing it, then it might as well be me. So there I was, crawling headfirst into some gook hellhole designed by the devil incarnate, with nothing but flashlight, pistol and dive gear being dragged on rope behind me. It was a sure tight fit, and I've never been too fond of those. And at one point it got steep, real steep, and if there was no way to turn around I was doubtful of being able to crawl up again backwards. Like, it felt quite a bit like, well, like I was going down into hell, with the tunnel narrowing and plunging at such a steep angle down, all the slick and mud with drops of it dripping down from the roof. It got so tight right near the end that I had a hard time breathing. From the tunnel wall scraping on both sides of me, chest and back, it was like being swallowed alive, which was at this point I would have headed back straight up if I could, but it was just down. The only way I could head was down. So that's what I did. I just kept crawling as the tunnel much was beginning to close on me from all sides. But all I could do was pull myself further in, trying to shine my light up ahead and my mouth hoping and praying to see a room or wider passage soon. Don't truly know how long I crawled for, cursing that Colonel Stars and Stripes for sending me down here, cursing myself for being stupid enough to actually crawl into a gook hellhole voluntarily. I was barely wriggling through the tunnel at this point, when I finally spot the reflection off water a further ways down into the tunnel. It's all so narrow now that I'm barely able to crawl or even breathe proper as I said, but I manage to reach it. So I take my light and the light shines down in there a bit and I look to see what sort of room or passage I found. But it was just more of the same blasted tunnel downward and now filled with muddy shit water that you'd barely see a couple feet through. So at this point I was wondering what the hell Uncle Sam had sent me down here for with diving gear if when I needed it. There was no goddamn room to even put it on. Barely enough room even to breathe. I was there a moment or two, screaming every curse known to man mostly out of fear of being trapped down in this hellish mud tunnel and with no way out except further down. That was about when I began to notice the water level was rising slowly, inch by inch toward my face. And like I said, my gear it's behind me, and there's no room to even reach my arms back let alone put it on. For a moment I put up a tremendous struggle trying to push myself back out of the tunnel, but I just ended up getting myself more trapped. Sometime during that, I must have dropped my flashlight because I can remember seeing it rolling down through the mud water and all light vanishing, which left me stuck there in the total pitch dark, lost beyond all hope of returning to the surface. Only sound I could hear beyond my own screams and curses was the water drops coming from the mud roof of this accursed devil tunnel to hell, and the quiet water whisper as it rose up towards me. I think at that point, and God forgive me for it, but I was of the mind that a quick death being preferable to drowning. But I'd gotten the gun, it was in my waistband I think, and I couldn't quite get my hand back to grab it. So I couldn't even end my own misery, though at the point of which I resigned myself to death it gave me a power of sorts. If I was already to die, already a dead man, then what danger was there in diving headfirst further into the tunnel's murky waters? I resolved myself that if I was to die in some watery gook tunnel to hell, with no chance of my body being recovered or seeing again light of day, there was no point in being coward-like about it. So I took a deep breath and plunged headfirst and crawling like someone possessed deeper into the depths of the tunnel. I don't recall much of the dive through that last portion of that was where the tunnel had been submerged, like I said, and I don't quite remember most of that. Just that I feel the tunnel widen and then I'm pulling myself out into an empty, open space. I still can't see nothing at all, so I'm trying to figure top from bottom all the while my lungs feel about to burst. And I think that I saw a glint from my flashlight which logic would dictate is at the bottom of the chamber. So I swim the opposite direction of that. And that's while I was swimming up, you see, thinking maybe there'd be an air pocket up near the top. Because I was at that point, hard pressed for a breath of air, any air at all. Weren't quite in my right mind either, or I probably would have just grabbed my mask and regulator off the rope trailing that was tied up behind me. But like I said, I was real desperate for a breath. Chest was burning, head was starting to feel weird, and I was swimming upward near as I could tell when my hand brushed up against something. Couldn't tell what in the blackness, but it was cold and felt like it was some sort of eel or other fish. But I just push it aside and keep going up. And all of a sudden I begin to feel it all around me, pressing up against me. The feeling was, well, it was slimy, slickish like as if it were a fish, but all real cold like and pressing up against me. And I was pushing them aside and trying to get further up before whatever they were could drag me down with them. Then I got a faceful of what I thought must have been some seaweed of some sort. It was real fine for seaweed, but it was this wet, stringy stuff. And it was just getting into my hands. This wet slime of stringy sort seaweed. Some sort of worms, I guess, is what I thought it was. Yeah, I guess that's what I thought. I pushed through all of it and finally, thank God, my hand feels an air pocket. I don't think I've ever been so relieved as when I took that first breath. In fact, I was so much relieved that I hardly noticed the smell at first. It was putrid and hellish. About as evil and horrid as I'd imagine most journalists which are masquerading as humans must smell like, beneath their suits of human skin that no doubt was flayed from some poor innocent soul without proper consent. But that's, well, I suppose that's a bit irrelevant. Anyhow, the stench, it was truly horrid. Smelled like death. The devil and all his demons were down here with me. But at the same time, I was real grateful to just be able to breathe regardless of quality of the air being shit. I stayed what must have been, a few minutes of breathing in that wretched stench before I heard it. There was sounds, it sounded like something else was breathing. Something who wasn't me. At first I was thinking it's an echo. But I hold my breath for a minute or so and I can hear it faintly above the water splashing. It was, I won't lie. It scared me pretty bad. Being down there in the pitch black, with those things swimming around below me, seaweed worms or whatever, all against my body in the water. After a bit I built up enough courage to dive down and find my flashlight. Had to push my way past those things in the water again, which at that point I had begun to suspect their true nature. Found the flashlight easy enough, being that it was the only light in the hellish darkness, and I can tell you, I was just about as grateful to have that light as I had been to take that first breath of air again. I go back up, shining my flashlight up through the mud shit water, and I see what I'd suspected. Those eels and creatures weren't eels. They were legs and arms and pieces of rotted flesh. Entire roof of the chamber was covered with well-dead women. VC women. They were all just bloated and floating face down, with black hair that was coming down through the water from the surface. The entire surface of the chamber was more or less a human carpet of death and decay. Bodies floating face down. Their hair was hanging down from over their faces. And I was there. And I'd seen it. And I had to, I swam back up and pushed some of the bodies aside. It was difficult. And I wasn't too good just then. But I had gotten back up to the surface. I was just really in a bit of a state. Of some sort. It set I was just, I guess, not feeling that well. Because you know that there was the other. I said that she was breathing. Right? It was, I had the gun out. And I saw her. And I blasted her. I don't know. It was, I wasn't intending to. You see, I don't think I intended to. I don't think so. But I saw her. And she had this eyes. Wide open. Her eyes didn't react to my light. She must not have been human. Because that's why I blasted her. I saw her there. Almost right next to me. And she had those eyes. So I blasted her. Right there. And those eyes didn't seem them no more. She was gone with the rest of the dead. She had this long, wet black hair, like the rest of them, I guess. And she was shivering. I think I was shivering too. But she was breathing, as well. The rest, they weren't. And she isn't now either. Because after that, I took my mask and re-gear. I took all my gear on. I dove back under and now, all my gear is good. I'm good. Got my mask, my oxygen. It's all good and I'm good. So I dove back under now. And I search I find another tunnel near the bottom that's leading further down. And near as I can tell, there's no other tunnels but the one I came from. I consider going back through there. But I chicken out on account of it being too narrow for my equipment to fit. And overall the narrow unpleasantness of the whole previous experience. So I take the other passage and I tell myself gotta go down to get back up. This tunnel, it's a bit wider. And it goes down a ways. A real good ways. It ain't comfy and the water is murky as shit. But it's a sure sight better than the last tunnel. So I'm counting my blessings and swimming. And trying to not feel the tangle of her hair. But I'm still swimming down for a long time. Eventually, I notice the walls aren't mud no more but made of some sort of stone. Like a cave more than a tunnel. And there was all sorts of creatures. fish with no eyes, strange sorts of bugs and the sort. I'd guess those VC tunneled into some cave system, and after who knows how long, I came out of the tunnel and into a chamber. This chamber, it was big, real big. Never even saw no roof or nothing with my flashlight. It was huge. I was pretty much astonished at the sight and quite amazed. It was a welcome thing to see after the narrow passages and all the dead. It was very calming to see. That is until I started to hear it. It was breathing like before, just that it was bigger. I think bigger than I think it should have been. Louder. In any case, it was she. I was hearing it again. The breathing. I wasn't alone in there. So I tried to be quiet, real quiet, because it wasn't safe. So I follow the current because the water has to go somewhere. I find another passage and I follow it a while. And the current gets quite strong. And it's basically just tumbling me around in this current. And I figure after all that it's goodbye. Good night. Had a good run, but I'm being thrown around in this current who knows how deep underwater, leading to God knows where in the earth. And I've seen daylight for the last time. Out of nowhere there's this absolutely blinding light and a thundering roar. And for a split second I must have thought I was dead. But then I'm falling and I hit the water and I'm free. I'm out in the daylight again, floating down a river. And that's the end of the story. Murray ended up floating down the river until it went under a bridge, where he climbed out and started walking until a military vehicle came down the road and found him. He had quite a bit of trouble telling me this story for reasons that I think are pretty obvious. I had to coax it out of him. Sorry for the length. I usually try to keep these stories short, but a condensed version just wouldn't have done this one justice. Like I said, this is the last story for this thread. Be sure to join me next Friday night for more stories of the deep. Hopefully by then I'll have figured out the website situation. Stay safe up there.